I finally have the timing chain all together on my 2002 12-valve VR6 Volkswagen Jetta. I was working without a manual and also without experience as to what the pieces all looked like when the car came apart, because the lower guides were gone. They were worn completely away. They broke apart, and actually the pins nearly wore in two. The timing chain was riding on the pins for a long time. So I guess I would say when your VR6 starts to make noise, listen to it, because even if you think the noise is subtle, it could be doing horrible things inside the engine. I drove this car to Georgia and back with it making this noise, and it was a noise based on my many years of experience of working with cars. It was a noise that I said, yeah, okay, that's something that I need to address soon, not my engine's going to fly apart. Well, it was an act of providence that I got there and back with it the way it was, because it was in dire straits. The lower guide here was gone, completely gone, and the guide here that the tensioner presses on was also gone, and the chain was riding on the piston of the tensioner. So the chain did that to the piston of the old tensioner as it rode on that piston in the absence of a guide. And the same kind of thing was going on over here on the tension side of the chain with this guide. This guide was gone, and the chain was bouncing around on the two support pins for that guide, and it bounced around on those, wore them, like I said, with the other pin, with this one, the same thing, wore it nearly in two, and incredibly, it shook the pins loose in the holes, and as the pins bounced around and vibrated in their holes, it wore the thread. It just wore the thread out of the cast iron block, and it polished the thread to, I'm not joking, like a mirror polish on the pins themselves, and of course took most of the thread off. Really remarkable that it was still alive. So this one's ready to go back together. I don't like leaving things stock. It's been an old habit of mine. So I went ahead and installed two Autotech cams, Autotech 262s, which I think is actually the only hydraulic 12-valve cam they offer. Tektronix has a few different cams, but I was able to get these for quite a bit cheaper. They're cheaper already, but I have a friend who's a distributor, and I was able to get a little discount. So I went ahead with the Autotechs to save some money, and really the difference between the cams between Autotech and Tektronix is pretty small. I wouldn't be surprised if the Autotech 262 and the Tektronix 264, I think it is, are actually the same cam. I wouldn't be surprised. Not saying they are, just wouldn't be surprised in today's market, the way things work, if they weren't the same, coming from the same vendor. So anyway, I put those cams in, and with the 12-valve, with the Mark IVs, you can't just throw the cams in with the stock intake, because the cams and the intake are like a tuned set. So I built an intake for it. I'll be showing some more of that later on. I've made a few videos, just haven't put them up. So the idea was basically that I would revert it to Mark III specs with a Mark III intake modified to fit a Mark IV with a large plenum, and a plenum that wraps around to and the throttle is like over here where the Mark IV is. I built a jig. Jig's over there on the floor. Built a jig to position the throttle body to be sure that everything else would go together in like a regular Mark IV. So I could run the stock intake. For now, if I decide to change it, I can. But anyway, long story. This is supposed to be a short video. All I want to do here is show the timing marks and tell you that it's really not that big of a deal. Everybody has to do this on these cars. My understanding is that Volkswagen intended this to be lifetime timing chains, which is part of why they put it on the back of the engine. They figured that nobody'd have to deal with it. Well, everybody does. The engines long outlive the guides. I mean, these plastic guides, they do last quite a long time, but come on, it's a piece of plastic that's being rubbed on by a metal chain at RPM, and the only thing that separates it from catastrophic failure within minutes is the thin film of oil. So gonna wear out, definitely gonna wear out. Okay, so you roll the engine over to top dead center, and there's a teeny tiny mark, and I was not having a manual. I was a little bit concerned that I wasn't actually seeing the mark correct, but there's a little bump there on the front cover, and there's a little, I'm sorry, but there's not enough light for you to see it, but there's a little notch that lines up with that, and it's a very small notch on the front pulley, so don't overlook it. Now, when you're setting timing on anything other than a Fiat, because they go top dead center on number 4, but when you're setting timing, you need to be top dead center compression on number 1. So of course there are 2 top dead centers. There's top dead center compression, there's top dead center at the end of the exhaust stroke. You know that your top dead center compression when the 2 lobes on the number 1 camshaft are pointed both upward, or outward and upward, like that. When you do that, when you've gotten to that point, the 2 slots on the back of these cams will accept the cam locking tool, which I got with the Autotech cams, and that locks the cams in place. Don't test it too much. It's only aluminum in this case. I don't know what the factory one is made of, but you could certainly damage it by forgetting that it was in there and turning the engine. Not that I'd do that or anything, but just saying in case you did. Anyway, so that'll lock in place, and that'll keep the cams in position. And then over here, when you're at top dead center, one tooth on the, it's not marked or anything, but one tooth on the chain wheel on the crankshaft will line up with the seam between the back main cap and the engine block. So the back, you can see a line between the main cap and the engine block where they're not one piece, and a tooth on the pulley will line up with that. And then on this intermediate shaft pulley, and truth be told, I don't know, this is my first experience with a VR6. I've successfully avoided them up till now, but now I own one. I don't know if this contains there's a balance shaft element to this, or if it's just driving the oil pump. But I'm assuming that there's it's got some balance shaft bumps or weights or whatever on it, because it gets timed. These holes in the pulley, one of them has a pointer in it, and I'm not going to be able to show. I doubt I'm going to be able to show you this because, let me see if I can get the trouble light going here. And Maybe that'll make things better. Yeah, not really. It's just me with an iPhone, so I'm not able to do this very well. But there's a tooth. There's a pointer tooth in one of the holes, and there's a slot on the cover for that intermediate shaft, and the pointer tooth and the slot will line up when you're at top dead center. And then of course your cams are timed. There's no markings, at least none that I see, on the cams, because you're supposed to have the tool. You're supposed to have the tool and put the cams in time with that. So those are your marks. You tear everything down. You take your chains off. You put everything back together, verifying that your marks are in place. I opted to roll the engine over a few times and then recheck to be sure I was there. I was at top dead center everywhere. To do that, just to be safe, I put the top cover back on, and I put the tensioner in place for this upper tensioner guide, so that I could be sure that the chain didn't go off when I was turning the engine over. Turned it over 4 or 5 times, brought it back up to top dead center, got up, found out that I was on the wrong top dead center. I was top dead center exhaust. So I rolled it over one more time, and got it up to top dead center intake or compression. I put the tool back in just to be sure that I was lined up over there with the camshafts, and I came down and I checked the marks again. So I checked, and you can see it with the eye and with getting in there, but I just can't show it to you with the camera. I checked to make sure the tooth and the line were aligned there, and once I did that, I knew that everything was okay, so I was ready to proceed. And then, guess what? I found out that I put a guide in backwards. This guide here, I had it so that there are 2 bumps facing out, and it didn't occur to me that it would actually go this way. And like I said, I didn't have one. I didn't have a mental picture of what it looked like from before, because all that stuff was completely gone. I mean, it was disintegrated, and my fault for not using Google and looking it up and figuring it out that it was supposed to go the other way. It does, in fact, go in the wrong way quite easily, and everything else goes in place, and you can verify timing and all that. And then you try to put the lower cover on with your factory gasket maker goop on it, and only then do you figure out that it's backwards. So if anybody else is doing this without having seen it before, or without having a manual to know what everything exactly looks like, or apparently being too lazy and stupid to look it up on Google like I was, this is the way this lower guide goes in, with the chain being visible all the way. It's trapped in there by the chain. I was thinking that it was actually going to be trapped by the lower cover. There are two bumps on the lower cover, and I was thinking that was what it rested against, and that's not the case. Look at that. See the polishing from where the pins were bouncing around in there. Pretty neat, huh? Okay, so it's all ready to go together now. I'm going to goop the lower cover up again. I've cleaned all the gasket maker off of it, and I'm going to reinstall the lower cover, and then the upper cover. And hey, before you, just one more thing, before you install the lower cover, don't forget to pull the pin out of the grenade. That could have been a mess. Yeah, that's there to keep the tensioner loaded while you're putting it in place. And once you've verified everything's correct, you pull that out. I darn near forgot. I reminded myself last night when I was in the house. I said self, don't forget that. Of course, I forgot it by the time I got out here, and I only just saw it when I was shooting this video, so I'm glad I did. Anyway, hope this helps. I'll post more on this later as I get it closer to being running. This is not the kind of work that I'd rather be doing in the workshop. I'd rather be welding something up. I'll get to more of those projects later on, but this is what I have to do to get to other more interesting things that are lurking in the background.